So the last video we reviewed exponents. In this video, we are going to continue our talk around exponents. This is going to be 3-1 number 2. Okay, but we're going to talk about exponents, and I'm going to abbreviate exponents, EXP. Exponents with negative bases. Okay, so really quickly to review what an exponent is. Let's say we have 3 to the 4th. Okay, this entire thing is what we call a power. And our power is split into two parts. We have our base in red here, and we have our exponent in blue. Okay, now remember what that looks like. The exponent tells us how many times we're multiplying the base times itself. So our base is 3, and our exponent tells us we need to multiply our 3 4 times itself. So there's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so now we can break this down. 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times 3 is 9. 9 times 9 is 81. So 3 to the 4th power is 81. Now, what we didn't talk about in our last video was when we have a negative base. So here's our first example of this. Okay, what that means is our base, so in this case, the 3 is negative. Now, there's two different variations of this, and we're going to go over both of them. The first variation is when the base is in parentheses. Okay, so we have our -2 here, but the -2 itself is in parentheses. So it's very important when you have parentheses, the base is the entire thing. Sorry, there was an announcement if you heard that. The base is the entire thing inside the parentheses. Okay, so you include the negative with the 2. All right, so this is the base, -2. Now, our exponent is still 4, and that should have been blue, but I'm going to keep it as red, exponent. And our exponent still tells us how many times to multiply our base times itself. So our base, because it's in parentheses, is -2. So when we write the expanded form, okay, remember this is expanded form here. Expanded form. We're going to put the -2 in parentheses just like we did before, just like it is in our power. So we have -2. There's 1. We're going to do it 4 times. So there's 2, 3, 4. I almost wrote the number 4 there. Okay. So we have -2 times -2 times -2 times -2. Now you're going to have to remember some of your integer properties. So when we have a negative times a negative number, we always get a positive number. When we have a negative times a positive, when they're opposite, we get a negative number. Okay, so that's going to come into play here, potentially. So we have -2 times -2. We have a negative number times a negative number. That's going to give us a positive 4. And we don't have to continue putting it in parentheses. We're just doing that in our expanded form right here. So on your worksheet, you're going to write it out in expanded form. Okay. We have a negative here times a negative here. Okay. That also gives us 4. Now we multiply +4 times +4. We get a positive 16 for our answer. So the big takeaway from this, when you have parentheses around your negative base, the entire thing inside the parentheses is the base. Okay, so our base is -2. We multiplied it by itself 4 times. That's what our exponent said. We get 4 times 4, and then we get 16. And remember your integer properties. Negative times a negative is a positive. Positive times a negative is a negative. All right, so here's our second example. Go ahead and rewind or pause if you need to catch up and write some stuff if you missed that. Now, here's our second example. Okay, I'm going to do negative 3. Let's do negative 3 to the fourth. Okay, now pause the video. What's different about our first example here and our second example? Well, there's one glaring thing that's missing, and that's the parentheses. There is no parentheses around this second power. Now, there's one big difference when we have parentheses and no parentheses. When we had parentheses, the base was the entire thing inside the parentheses. When we do not have parentheses, the base does not include the negative. The negative technically is not part of the 3. Now that sounds really weird. There's actually a negative 1 that's out front multiplying by the power. And I know it's a little bit confusing, but the only thing you need to know is when we do not have parentheses and your base is negative, you do not include the negative sign. It's just the 3. Now, let me show you what that looks like in expanded form. So we have our base here, we have our exponent here. Okay? So our exponent tells us how many times we multiply our base times itself. There's no negative in front. So it's 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. But what we have to remember is that there is a negative in front. So we write our expanded form with no negatives because the 3 technically does not have a negative on it. Once we write it in expanded form, we put a negative out front. So we have to solve or simplify the 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 first, and then we attach the negative to whatever we get. So let's do that right now. 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times 3 is 9. 9 times 9 gives us 81. But because there was a negative out front, our answer is negative 81. Kind of weird. Whenever you do not have parentheses, your answer will always be negative. Okay? When you do have parentheses, sometimes your answer will be positive, like this, and sometimes your answer will be negative. Let me show you a quick example of what it would look like if it's negative. So if I have negative 2 to the third, okay, because there's parentheses, my base includes the negative. The parentheses say it includes the negative. Okay, so let me write this in expanded form. We have negative 2 multiplied by itself 3 times. Okay, so negative 2 times negative 2 is 4. Now we have a positive times a negative. 4 times negative 2 gives us negative 8. So if you look at our first example here, we got a positive answer because we have an even exponent. If we have an odd exponent and we have parentheses, we get a negative answer, right? So the big takeaway from this, if you have parentheses, you include everything inside the parentheses. If you don't have parentheses and your base is negative, you just include the number. The negative is not technically part of the power. The negative goes out in front, and if there's no parentheses and your base is negative, you always get a negative answer, no matter what. Okay? Hopefully that made sense. Rewatch this or post a private comment or during our check-in. I'm happy to help you with any of this. Good luck.